No one warned her the truth was hanging on the wall. On her very first day as a live-in maid at a sprawling Boston mansion, Grace Miller stepped into the parlor, and her knees nearly gave out. Above the fireplace was a massive oil portrait of a young man with steel gray eyes and a half-smile she'd memorized years ago. The same eyes her little girl had. The same face that once whispered promises in a tiny coffee shop before vanishing without a goodbye. Grace's voice came out sharper than she meant. "Ma'am, why is my daughter's father the man in that portrait?" The homeowner, Evelyn Hawthorne, didn't flinch. She froze. Her gaze snapped from Grace to the painting like she'd been punched. Then the ice returned. "Who told you to say that?" she demanded, already convinced this was a scam. But Grace didn't have a script. She had a child, Lily, and 5 years of unanswered nights. She told Evelyn about Caleb, the quiet regular from Rosewood Cafe, who ordered black coffee, no sugar, every morning. About the 3 short months that felt like forever. About the silence afterward. About finding out she was pregnant and raising Lily alone, taking any job that paid enough to keep the lights on. Evelyn ordered a background check. Everything matched, no lies, no con. Later, while cleaning upstairs, Grace found something that made her hands shake, an old cafe coaster, Rosewood Cafe, saved in a drawer like a relic. Her name in her handwriting still there. That evening, Evelyn summoned her son home. When he walked into the parlor, Caleb Hawthorne looked at Grace and went pale. Because the past hadn't disappeared. It had been waiting. Caleb didn't speak at first. He just stared at Grace like his lungs forgot what to do. The room went so quiet you could hear the old clock ticking, each click sounding like a warning shot. Evelyn Hawthorne broke the silence with a voice that could cut glass. "Sit down. Both of you." She didn't ask. She commanded. Grace stayed standing anyway. Her hands were clenched at her sides, nails biting into her palms. "I'm not here for money," she said fast, before anyone could accuse her. "I'm here because my daughter deserves the truth." Caleb's eyes flicked to the portrait above the fireplace, his own face staring back at him like a ghost, and then back to Grace. "Grace," he whispered, like saying her name hurt. Evelyn's gaze snapped to him. "Do you know her?" Caleb swallowed hard. "I did." That single sentence hit Evelyn like a betrayal. Her mouth tightened, and for a moment her perfect posture cracked. "You told me you were abroad," she said, each word measured. "You told me you were building a future." "I was trying to," Caleb said, voice shaking now. "I didn't." He stopped, like the rest of the sentence might destroy him. Grace stepped forward finally. "Then explain the part where you vanished," she said. "Explain the part where I found out I was pregnant and you were just gone." Evelyn raised a hand, silencing them both. Her eyes were cold, but not empty. There was something underneath it. Fear. Calculation. Regret. "Start from the beginning," Evelyn ordered Grace. So Grace did. The early mornings at Rosewood Cafe, the black coffee, no sugar, the way Caleb watched the door like he expected trouble to walk in. The 3 months that felt safe, until the day he didn't show up again. When Grace finished, Evelyn didn't insult her. She didn't laugh. Instead, she stood, walked to the window, and spoke without turning around. "If what you're saying is true," she said softly, "then my son has a child." Caleb's face drained of color, and Grace realized something terrifying in that moment. This wasn't just a love story that went wrong. This was a family secret that had been buried on purpose. Caleb finally sank onto the edge of the leather sofa, like his legs had been cut out from under him. His voice came rough, barely louder than the ticking clock. "At Rosewood. I wasn't supposed to be there." Grace's stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" He rubbed his hands together, restless, haunted. "My last name wasn't safe. Not in certain circles. So I used a different one. I told myself it was temporary, just long enough to breathe like a normal person." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "You mean you hid?" Caleb flinched. "I mean I was trying to survive." Grace took one step closer. "And I was what? Just collateral damage." His gaze snapped up, and for a second the mask cracked completely. "No." He swallowed. "You were the only thing that felt real. Grace's throat burned, but she didn't let him off the hook. "Then why did you disappear?" Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked at his mother like a man cornered. Evelyn didn't blink. She just folded her arms, waiting. Caleb exhaled hard. "Because someone found me," he said. "And when they did, they made it clear if I didn't come back and fall in line, people around me would pay for it." Grace's heart started pounding. "People like me?" He didn't answer right away. That silence was an answer all by itself. Evelyn's voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. "So you ran back home and left her holding the consequences?" "I thought I was protecting her." Caleb said the words tumbling out now. "I told myself if I vanished, she'd be safe. I told myself she'd move on. I didn't know about the baby." His eyes lifted to Grace, shining with panic. "I swear to you, Grace, I didn't know." Grace's breath caught. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small, worn photo creased at the corners from being held too many nights. A little girl with warm brown curls, a missing front tooth, and those unmistakable steel-gray eyes. Grace placed the photo in Caleb's shaking hands. "Her name is Lily," she said, voice low but steady. "She's 4. She loves drawing houses, and every time she asks where her dad is, I have to swallow the truth." Caleb stared at the picture like it might burn him. Then his shoulders folded, and he whispered the only honest thing left. "Oh my God, that's my kid." Evelyn didn't comfort him. She didn't soften. She stood up slowly the way a judge stands before the verdict and looked straight at Grace. "If you're lying," she said, calm as a blade, "you chose the wrong house." Grace didn't blink. "Then check," she answered. "Please, check everything." Evelyn turned and walked out, heels clicking down the hallway like punctuation marks. A minute later, the mansion felt even colder, like the walls themselves were listening. Upstairs behind a closed door, Evelyn made one phone call. "Martin," she said to her security chief, Martin Reed. "I want a full background report on Grace Miller, every address, every employer, every hospital record you can legally confirm, and I want it tonight." Back in the parlor, Caleb sat with Lily's photo in his hands, staring so hard his eyes went red. He looked up at Grace, voice cracking. "Tell me. She's okay. Tell me you're okay." Grace folded her arms over her chest, not to be defensive, just to hold herself together. "We're alive," she said. "That's the best I can promise." Hours crawled by. The mansion's staff moved like shadows. No one spoke above a whisper. Even the chandelier light felt tense. Then Evelyn returned. No dramatic entrance, no slammed doors, just a woman holding a thin folder that suddenly weighed 100 pounds. She didn't hand it to Grace. She placed it on the coffee table and opened it in front of them, like evidence. "Grace Miller," she read aloud. "Age 31. Foster care system. No criminal record. Employment history diner, nursing home kitchen cafe housekeeping. Evictions. Because rent went up. Medical bills. Because the insurance didn't cover enough." Grace's face flushed, but she didn't look away. Evelyn kept going slower now. "A child. Lily. Born 4 years ago. No father listed, no lawsuits, no demands, no history of trying to reach this family." Caleb's mouth fell open. He started." Grace cut him off. "I never knew who you really were," she said. "And after you disappeared, I was too busy keeping a roof over our heads to chase ghosts." Evelyn's fingers trembled just once before she closed the folder. The icy certainty in her posture began to crack, replaced by something far more frightening for a woman like her. Truth. She looked at Grace, and her voice lowered. "Everything matches," she admitted. "And that means—" Her eyes flicked to her son. "That means you didn't just leave a woman behind, Caleb." Caleb swallowed his chest, rising and falling like he'd been running. Evelyn leaned in, quiet, but absolute. "You left your daughter behind." And in that moment, Grace realized she hadn't walked into a mansion. She'd walked into a storm that had been waiting 5 years to break. Before we go on tap, like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Because this next part is the detail that flips the whole story on its head. Grace tried to return to work like nothing happened. Mop, linen, Quiet footsteps down a hallway that suddenly felt like a courtroom. But the mansion wasn't letting her breathe. Every corner held a reminder, wealth, power, and a portrait that had just detonated her life. She was assigned to clean Caleb's upstairs suite. The door creaked open, and the air smelled like cedar and old cologne, like someone who kept leaving but never really moved on. Grace kept her eyes down, focused on the simple things. Bed, desk, nightstand. Then she opened the top drawer, and her heart stopped. A single beat-up cardboard coaster sat inside like it was priceless. Faded logo, coffee stain ring, a small smudge of ink across the edge. Rosewood Cafe. Grace's fingers hovered, shaking. She lifted it like it might crumble. And there it was, still readable after all these years. Her own handwriting. Grace, 7:10 a.m. The exact time she used to scribble on takeout orders when the morning rush hit. The way she'd done it 1,000 times without thinking. She stared so long her vision blurred. "So you didn't forget me," she whispered to the empty room. "You kept a piece of me." Behind her, the floorboard creaked. Grace spun around fast, coaster clutched to her chest like evidence. Evelyn stood in the doorway, perfectly composed, except for the tightness around her eyes. She looked at the coaster and didn't ask what it was. She already knew. Grace's voice came out low and raw. "He kept this," she said, "for 5 years." Evelyn stepped closer, gaze fixed on that tiny circle of cardboard, as if it were a confession. "That's not something a man keeps if he simply walked away," she murmured. Grace's laugh was short, bitter. "Then why did I spend 5 years crying into a pillow telling my daughter bedtime stories about a father I couldn't even name?" Evelyn's jaw flexed. For the first time, her mask slipped just a crack, and what showed underneath wasn't cruelty. It was guilt, because Evelyn said quietly, "There are forces attached to this family you don't understand." Grace lifted the coaster higher. "Then help me understand," she snapped. "Because that little girl downstairs, Lily, she's not your family secret. She's a child." Evelyn stared at the handwriting again, and when she spoke, her words landed like a warning and an apology at the same time. "If he kept that," she said, voice tight, "then the reason he vanished wasn't because he stopped caring." Grace felt the air leave her lungs, because if Caleb hadn't left by choice, then someone had made him. Evelyn didn't argue after that. She didn't raise her voice. She did something far more serious. She turned on her heel and walked straight down the hall to the study, the coaster still in Grace's hands, like a lit match. Grace followed, heart thudding, because you don't get invited into a room like that, unless something is about to break. Evelyn picked up the phone. No hesitation. "Martin," she said, crisp and controlled. "Bring my son home, now. Not in an hour. Not after dinner. Now." A pause, and Martin Evelyn added, lowering her voice. "No one else needs to know why." Grace's stomach twisted. "You're calling him like he's an employee." Evelyn's eyes flicked to her. "In this family, everyone is something," she said. "Son, asset, target. It depends on the day." Minutes later, the front doors opened and shut with a heavy finality. Footsteps fast. A man moving like he'd been dragged out of another life and dropped into this one. Grace and Evelyn were already in the parlor when Caleb walked in. He took one step, then stopped dead. His gaze landed on Grace first, like he'd been punched in the chest. Then his eyes rose to the portrait above the fireplace, then back to her, as if he couldn't decide which one was the real ghost. "Grace," he said, barely a sound. Grace didn't move. She didn't run. She didn't soften. She just held his stare, and you could see 5 years of silence pressing against her teeth. Evelyn's voice cut through the moment like a gavel. "Close the door." Caleb did it, still staring at Grace, still pale. Evelyn stepped forward, calm on the outside, shaking on the inside. "You remember her?" she said. "Not a question." Caleb's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Grace finally spoke, voice low and steady. "I didn't come here to trap you," she said. "I came here to work. And then I saw your face on the wall." Caleb's eyes dropped to the coaster in her hand. His breath caught. "You still have that?" Grace lifted it, and the handwriting flashed between them like a spotlight. "No," she said. "You do." Caleb swallowed hard, his throat working like he was fighting panic. "Where is she?" he asked, and the words came out broken. Is Is the baby? She's not a baby. Grace snapped, the edge in her voice finally cracking through. She's 4. Her name is Lily. And she has your eyes. Caleb's knees looked ready to buckle. Evelyn didn't let him fall into self-pity. She stepped closer until he had no place to hide. Her voice dropped deadly quiet. You have a daughter, she said. And you are going to look me in the face and tell me why you left her in the dark. Caleb's eyes flicked to Grace, pleading terrified, grateful, guilty all at once. Grace stood her ground, because this was the moment the mansion stopped being a job and became a reckoning. Evelyn didn't let this moment rot into shouting. She lifted one hand, sharp, final, and the room obeyed. Grace, she said quieter, now bring Lily here. Not to be paraded, to be introduced. Properly. Grace's throat tightened. She's not a prop, she warned. I know, Evelyn replied, and for the first time her voice carried something almost human. That's why we do this carefully. Upstairs, Grace knelt by Lily's little bed and smoothed a curl off her forehead. Lily blinked awake, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. Sweetheart, Grace whispered. There's someone downstairs who wants to meet you. Lily sat up, suspicious in the way only a 4-year-old can be. Is it a new teacher? Grace forced a smile. Not exactly. Downstairs, Caleb looked like he might be sick. He paced once, then stopped himself like Evelyn's furniture was sacred. When he heard small footsteps on the stairs, he went still, hands open at his sides, palms out like he was approaching a skittish animal. Lily appeared in the doorway holding her worn sketchbook like a shield. Grace crouched beside her. Honey, this is Caleb, she said, choosing the name first, the truth second. He's someone important from my past. Caleb swallowed so hard his jaw trembled. He lowered himself to one knee to make himself smaller. Safer. Hi, he said softly. I'm Caleb. Lily stared at him, head tilted. Her eyes, those unmistakable steel-gray eyes, tracked his face with calm, blunt curiosity. You live here? Caleb nodded. Yeah, I do. Lily looked back at Grace. Why is he shaking? Grace's breath caught. Evelyn's gaze flicked away. Even Martin, standing near the doorway like a statue, shifted his weight. Caleb let out a broken laugh, half a sob. Because I'm nervous, he admitted. You're very important. Lily didn't smile. She flipped open her sketchbook and pushed it toward him. I'm drawing a house, she announced. This is the kitchen. This is my room. And this is where my dad is supposed to be. Grace's chest squeezed so hard it hurt. Caleb stared at the page like it was holy. He didn't touch her. He didn't reach too fast. He simply pointed, gentle. Can I draw with you? He asked. Lily considered him like a judge. Then she handed him a crayon. Only the roof, she said. Don't mess up my windows. Caleb nodded quickly. Just the roof. Promise. He drew slow. Careful. Like every line could cost him everything. Grace watched from the edge of the room, arms wrapped around herself. She expected fireworks, drama, tears. Instead, she got something quieter. A man earning his way back into a child's world, one crayon stroke at a time. The next morning felt almost normal. Almost. Lily sat at the kitchen table coloring like nothing in the world could touch her. Caleb stood nearby making toast he didn't even eat. Grace watched them both, her chest tight. Because peace in a house like this never lasts. Then the phone rang. Grace answered, and Mrs. Harper, the older neighbor across the street, sounded out of breath. Honey, don't panic, but there's a black SUV parked near the preschool again. Same one as yesterday. Grace's hand went cold around the receiver. Again. Yes, Mrs. Harper whispered. And someone came to my porch asking questions. What time you pick Lily up? Who drives her? I told them I didn't know a thing, but I'm telling you now, this isn't normal. Grace hung up and turned. Caleb was already moving. Not running, calculating. He grabbed his phone, texted once, then looked at Martin Reed in the doorway. 2 cars. Now. One at the school, one on our tail. Grace stared at him. What is happening? Caleb's eyes hardened, and for a split second he looked like the man from the portrait again, polished on the outside, dangerous underneath. Someone's testing the fence, he said. Grace stepped closer. Someone who... Martin answered first, voice low. A crew teed to Dominic Kessler. Grace blinked. I don't know who that is. Evelyn's face tightened. You don't need to, she said, but my family does. Caleb exhaled through his nose like he'd been holding a storm in his chest for years. Dominic's been waiting for weakness, he said. A crack, a pressure point. Grace followed his gaze to the kitchen table, straight to Lily, and everything inside her snapped. No, she said, stepping between Caleb and her daughter like a wall. Don't you even think about saying her name like she's part of your strategy. Caleb's voice softened. Versailles, you don't get to… She cut in, sharp and shaking. You vanished, and I carried this alone. I slept with one ear open in cheap apartments. I skipped meals so she could eat. And now you're telling me men in black SUVs are circling my kid because of you. Lily looked up, crayon paused. Mommy, Grace forced her voice gentle. Baby, keep coloring. But her eyes never left Caleb. Caleb stepped forward slowly, palms open. I didn't want this, he said. The second I realized Lily existed, I knew she'd become a target. That's why we lock this down. That's why we do it right. Grace's laugh was short and bitter, right like you did 5 years ago. Silence. Evelyn finally spoke, quieter than everyone. He's not wrong about the danger, she said. But you're not wrong about the cost. Caleb's jaw clenched. I'll handle Dominic, he said, voice turning steel. I won't let anyone touch her. I won't let anyone touch either of you. Grace leaned in, eyes burning. Then prove it, she whispered. Because my daughter is not your weakness. Outside somewhere beyond the iron gates, the black SUV idled, waiting. Caleb didn't raise his voice. He didn't promise the moon. He just turned to Martin Reed and said, Shut it down! Every loose end! Today! Grace crossed her arms, still shielding Lily with her body. What does shut it down even mean in your world? Caleb looked at her steady finally. It means I stop pretending I can balance 2 lives, he said. I built things to survive. Power, alliances, territory, 15 years of it. His throat bobbed. And if Dominic Kessler is using my daughter as leverage, then that whole structure is already poisoned. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. You understand what you're saying? Caleb nodded once. I'm saying I'll burn my own kingdom down before I let one man get close to Lily. Grace searched his face for the usual rich man escape hatch. Excuses, lawyers, a private jet out of the mess. There wasn't one. Caleb stepped past her, not toward Lily, toward the front doors. Martin, double security at the preschool. New pickup protocol. No one approaches Grace or Lily without clearance. He paused, then added the line Grace never thought she'd hear from him. And if Dominic wants war, he can have me, not them. Evelyn's hand hovered near her necklace, her one tell. Fine, she said quietly. But understand this, Caleb, once you start this, you can't undo it. Caleb didn't turn around. I'm not trying to undo anything he said. I'm trying to do one thing right. Grace's eyes stung. She hated how badly she wanted to believe him. Lily tugged Grace's sleeve. Mommy, are we safe? Grace knelt, pulling her close. We're going to be, she whispered, then looked up at Caleb. You better make that true. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't finding love, it's taking responsibility when love comes with consequences. Real change doesn't happen with pretty words. It happens when someone is willing to lose comfort status and pride to protect what actually matters. In real life, the people who grow aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who stop running and finally show up fully. If this story hit you in the heart, comment below. What would you do in Grace's position? Walk away to stay safe, or stay and demand the truth? And if you want more stories like this, raw, cinematic, and real, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me where you're watching from.